Captains are the exemplars of everything a Space Marine should be, and they often use the war gear available to every Space Marine in ways to show just how talented they are. And in one of those cases, that would be Gravis armor, seen in Captains that wear Gravis armor. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Gravis Captain, who is quite the tanky melee brawler, for the most part. He comes with a couple of main loadouts, and he costs 80 points. He has standard Gravis character stat line. He moves 5 inches, so rather slow. He's toughness 6, so quite resilient to small arms like las guns or even heavy bolters. With a 3+ save and a 4+ invulnerable, he's quite good on that front as well. And 6 wounds means he is pretty dang tough. Leadership 6+ and OC1 are fairly standard, but not bad in the slightest. He comes in 2 loadouts, as I mentioned. The first one I'll cover is the simpler one, which is the Mastercrafted Heavy Bolt Rifle and Mastercrafted Power Weapon. Mastercrafted Heavy Bolt Rifle goes up to 30-inch range with 2 attacks that hit on 2s at Strength 5, AP 1, and Damage 2, which is, of course, a pretty solid profile for killing Space Marines. Then his Mastercrafted Power Weapon is 6 attacks that hit on 2s at Strength 5, AP 2, and Damage 2, which is also a very solid Space Marine and infantry killing weapon in general. Definitely not a bad loadout. However, his other one is in his more modern kit with the Boltstorm Gauntlet, Power Fist, and the Relic Weapon Auxiliary, I'll call it. The Boltstorm Gauntlet is 12-inch range at 3 attacks with that hit on 2s at Strength 4, AP 1, and Damage 1. Good for killing light infantry, and it does have pistol. In terms of melee weapons, the Power Fist is 5 attacks, hit on 2s at Strength 8, AP 2, and Damage 2, a very solid profile for fighting most things in the game. And then in his offhand, he can take either a Relic Blade, Relic Chainsword, or Relic Fist. The Relic Blade has extra attacks with 2 attacks that hit on 2s at Strength 5, AP 2, and Damage 2. This is a pretty solid profile for killing infantry mainly. And then the Relic Chainsword is extra attacks. It has 3 attacks that hit on 2s at Strength 4, AP 1, and Damage 2, as it's a Relic Chainsword, of course. And then the Relic Fist has extra attacks with 1 attack that hits on 2s at Strength 8, AP 2, and Damage 2. If I were to pick, I would pick between either the Chainsword or the Fist. The Chainsword mainly just for the extra volume of attacks, and then the Fist, of course, just to double down. Remember, extra attacks cannot be modified, though. Then he, of course, has Leader, and then Rites of Battle to reduce the cost of a CP stratagem that targets his unit once per battle round, and then Refusal to Yield when allocating attacks to this character have the damage characteristic, which is very solid for defense. So obviously he can lead anything in Gravis armor, but the pick of the litter is the Aggressors. The Aggressors have a good blend of horde clearing shooting and pretty solid melee, especially with access to free stratagems and the extra muscle this guy brings. And as I mentioned, they're very, they have all that varied damage, which means they tend to be quite good targets for stratagems, so getting them for cheaper or even free is very useful from this guy. If you wanted to, you could take a Land Raider Crusader and run him with a Land Raider Crusader, sorry, I forgot the name of it for a second, and that would be quite a lot of might in one transport. In terms of heavy intercessors, I, for the most part, wouldn't run him with them. I don't think they have much benefit from being led, and generally prefer just being a very cheap unit to hold objectives while plinking away with their heavy bolters. And then Eradicators, I don't really think Eradicators generally need character buffs that often, as they're just so naturally good at killing tanks and stuff like that. And a lot of stratagems for the Space Marines often more focused on melee, outside of, as I mentioned, Crucible of Battle and Firestorm, but generally Captain isn't the most used for them, and if you're going to bring a character, I'd bring a Biologist, because he adds lethal hits, which helps with their wounding, as well as the fact that he's cheaper, so you can get those enhancements in for cheaper if wanting an enhancement with them. Speaking of detachments, Gladius is, it's bog standard. Honor Vehement is very good on this guy. Remember, it only affixes his main melee weapon, not his extra attack weapon. And then, of course, Honor the Chapter is huge for Power Fists. They love +1 to wound. And then Anvil is actually a pretty solid home for this guy. If you run him with the Mastercrafted Bolt Rifle, he's probably the shootiest character. So if you're wanting to use heavy ints as a gunline, he's, right at home there. And the Revive on 2+ enhancement is good, even if you're running him melee-oriented. And Ironstorm, there isn't really anything for him. He could be really tough with the 4+ Feel No Pain, just because of how, having damage, 4+ Feel No Pain, very good combo. But that's not outstanding and probably more of a fun thing. And then Firestorm, he really appreciates the War Tempered Artifice, of course, and Crucible of Battle is always useful for +1 to wound when in melee, or when shooting with something like Eradicators, but I already mentioned them. Stormlance, the speed is huge for this unit. They love getting that speed, though they will kind of miss having something to get +1 to wound with. And then Vanguard, if you're using a big unit of aggressors with blade driven deep, he's great. Way to get that in there, as well as adding that extra muscle to apply that early pressure that you want to do in Vanguard to really start the game on your own footing. And then in First Company, he can't lead veterans, so he doesn't really have much value there, as none of the Gravis units count as a veteran unit for that detachment. So if you are running First Company, I'd say leave him at home. But in terms of the others, I'd say he's at probably his best in Gladius and Firestorm, and then probably with Stormlance and Vanguard in a close second. But as I mentioned, I think the only detachment he's really bad in is First Company. And in terms of alternate chapters, he really only benefits from like a Liberator Assault Group from the Blood Angels, and of course like the Company of Heroes, I think it's called, from the Space Wolves. He can definitely benefit there, but I need to read up more on that. And this guy is actually a pretty fun character. I quite like the whole extra attack weapon, which sort of changes up how he functions. Is he better at just punching elites? Is he better at clearing hordes? Whatever it may be. I really quite like that. And I think all three options are pretty balanced. As I mentioned, the Chainsword and the Fist are my favorite, just because the Chainsword has damage too, which all character Chainswords really should. I think that that's just, it's a solid thing to have. 3 extra attacks, they're all damage too. Very nice. But do remember, obviously, you can't modify extra attack weapons. They can't get extra attacks. Funnily enough, extra attack weapons can't get extra attacks, but they can be attacked with alongside your main melee weapon. You can't change their strength, and you can't change their AP or damage, which does slightly limit it in things like Honor the Chapter with its +1 AP would not affect that, but the +1 to wound would still be in effect. I think this guy and his aggressor retinue is something that can put up reasonable enough pressure to threaten anything in the game, and with his free stratagems, he shouldn't have too much trouble getting a damage stratagem going to help him tear down the toughest stuff in the game, which the Power Fists do need a little bump to be able to take down that level of toughness, whether it be a knight or something similar. +1 to wound is the huge thing. Though they aren't super tough, just keep that in mind, they will fall pretty quickly to things like Plasma Fire, so you may want to give them a Repulsor or a Land Raider just to have them getting into the midfield and they start crumping things as fast as possible, which is always a very valuable thing to have. And as I mentioned, he really excels in any place he can get +1 to wound, whether that be Liberator Assault Group, Honor the Chapter, Firestorm. Those are the areas he's going to be extremely effective in. Unfortunately, he can't benefit from things like Deathwing and the Dark Angels, which is sort of my roundhouse. But, I still think he's a very solid unit, and he's all around pretty fun. I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.